Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Commons in Conversation. As you may know, these conversations are an extension of our project. It's called The Commons, where we're exploring divisions in the country and really how philanthropy and nonprofits are working together to try to strengthen the country and strengthen their own community. You can see our work at philanthropy.com/the commons. I'm really excited today. We'll be talking with one of the most interesting voices in fundraising in this moment, Allison Fine. She's someone really who knows the ins and outs of a development office, but she also, from our reporting, we've come to appreciate her as someone who also can take a step back and think about how your fundraising tactics and strategies affect the health of an organization, the health of your community, and even the health of the country as a whole. She's also got great expertise on technology and has written several books about fundraising and nonprofit leadership. One I'll mention, The Smart Nonprofit, Staying Human-Centered in an Automated World. She wrote that with Beth Cantor. Now, not long ago, Allison wrote a terrific piece for us. It was called Relentless Fundraising is Eroding Trust in Nonprofits. Here's how to fix things. And I really wanted to get her on this show so that we could talk more about the ideas she presented in that piece and what it means for an organization to build trust among its supporters and the public as a whole. So, Allison, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure, Drew. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. And listen, if we could start, if you could just talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and the organization you lead, every.org.
Sure. So I've been working at this intersection of digital tech and social good for a long time. Have written a lot about it, as you mentioned. And really, my focus has always been, Drew, about how we can unlock the power of organizations by connecting them better to their key people and communities, right? How to unfortress them, as Beth Cantor and I talked about in the Network Nonprofit, right? How to take down the walls and open them up and push information, not have an equal push and pull of information and engagement. And that's still a challenge for a lot of organizations. I joined every.org 3 years ago. It's been an absolutely joyful time here, Drew. We were started by Silicon Valley folks, and our chair is Garrett Camp, the co-founder of Uber. He's a tremendous supporter of ours. And every.org is a nonprofit. We have a platform for giving and a free donate button. And our job is to get all the friction out of online giving. And we do that by enabling any organization to accept any kind of payment method: stock, crypto, DAF, mobile, credit cards. And we're funded entirely by grants and donations. And that's the whole thing. And we're growing very quickly. It's a very joyful place to be. And it feels great every day, Drew, to be able to help nonprofits raise the funds that they need.
Well, we were talking earlier, you just Giving Tuesday was obviously a success for the field. You all saw a lot of that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I wanted to, before we dive in, and we're going to go into some details about solutions and things you can do, but I want to take a step back at the 30,000 foot level. We're going to be talking about trust and how organizations can build trust. And the question, I guess, for me is, why is fundraising such a key when you're thinking about trying to build trust with the public and with your supporters?
So fundraising is the meeting place between organizations and people, whether they are current or prospective donors. It is the place where people outside the organization hear the most about an organization, get an impression of them, can share with other people. So it is the greatest opportunity an organization has to communicate with people who they are, why they are, what they stand for, how they operate. And, this year in particular, Drew, this has been such a painful year for so many causes and so many organizations. They may have lost USAID money or other government grants. The economy has been very up and down this year. And if there's one thing in particular organizations need to lean into right now, it's transparency and trust.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about that leaning in, but even starting with the idea of what are the conventional fundraising practices that actually push donors away, push supporters away, and get in the way of that transparency?
Yeah, so there are two 20% metrics that we really, as a field, need to pay attention to. One
Hmm.
is the 20% drop in donors overall this century, right? 20% fewer people used to give to a charity than they do today. The other 20%, or if we're going to be technical, Drew, 19% on average, are the donors that give a second time to an organization. So we have fewer donors and what I call a leaky bucket, which is you put 100 donors in a bucket. By the time you get to year 2, there are only 19 standing there, right? This is a catastrophe for a lot of nonprofit organizations. And within that context of those two data points is this conventional wisdom that we've been living in for decades. It started with direct mail and then transitioned to email. And it's what I call the hamster wheel of transactional fundraising. It's all those emails, Drew, right? And it's just supersizing the constant asks, and nobody likes it. Development staffs are burning out. It's incredibly difficult to try to raise money in any time, especially
Hmm.
now, and with the cacophony of this ongoing onslaught of asks from organizations, and they don't work, right? This is what we don't talk about enough as a sector, Drew, right? Acquiring new donors through email is very expensive because you got to buy a list and then you send it out and you're looking for a 2-3% response on that. But the conventional wisdom is don't worry about the low response rate because those donors are going to stay with you. You'll make money on the total lifetime of that donor.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the reality is they go into the leaky bucket and you're losing them faster than you're getting them. And they're costing a ton. And it is terrifying for organizations to think about stopping the hamster wheel, right? What's going to replace the hamster wheel? And what we're going to talk about today, Drew, is there are lots of things that can replace the hamster wheel, but it takes leadership and it takes a
Hmm.
change of focus for your development team.
The question of we were just talking before the call about Giving Tuesday. We saw a
Yeah.
growth in the number of everyday donors giving, and that's really good news given that easily over the past decade, 15 years, we have seen a decline in donor participation. The everyday donor has walked away, and there are
Yeah.
lots of reasons for that: decline in the middle class, the discretionary income of the middle class, decline in religious attendance, which often fueled that small giving. But I think you also believe that some of that decline is due to this transactional nature of fundraising. Is that right?
I think that's right. There's no question that the hamster wheel has contributed to people feeling like they want to run away. They want to unsubscribe, right? They don't want
Mhm.
to be constantly barraged to give
Right.
another
Right.
gift. I will say this entire year, Drew, our message at every.org has been focus on everyday donors because you're really at risk of losing government grants or a major funder changing their mind with the changing landscape right now. And we were delighted on Giving Tuesday to see that total revenue went up about 30%, but the number of donors, Drew, went up over 100%. So
Wow.
we're seeing on every.org, 75% of the organizations on our platform have budgets under $5 million a year, right? Because we're providing world-class technology to organizations of any size, right? We don't charge transaction fees. So they're very welcome with us. And so we're seeing smaller organizations raising money from a lot more donors, which is great news for them.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Now we got to keep the donors, Drew, and
Mhm.
that's the charge going into next year.
Well, let me ask some. You mentioned it with leadership, and I think it's very clear that no fundraiser wants to go into sort of this transactional relationship with
Right.
donors. there are a lot of pressures that come to this. And what do you think are some of the reasons why folks end up defaulting to this approach to fundraising?
So it starts in the boardroom, Drew, right? We stuff our boards with people from professional backgrounds, lawyers and finance people, and they come at this with generally or often no context for the work,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so board meetings center on looking at the financial statements. And the easiest thing for a board of people from diverse backgrounds who may not know nonprofits well to focus on is cash in the door, right?
Yep.
We've got to hit these budget numbers every month, every quarter. And to do that, the first question a board asks is, what was your revenue this month? They rarely ask, how many donors did you retain or how much did it cost you to get a new donor? I've not had that
Hmm.
conversation at a board table. I've been at a lot of board tables, Drew, right?
Yep. Yep.
So coming from the very top of an organization is an intense pressure to get cash in the door. And the fastest way to do that is send out a lot of solicitations. And that's the creation of the leaky bucket, right?
Hmm.
So we need to begin to ask different questions at the board table, right? For instance, we could be asking, how do donors feel about our organization? Do they feel invited and included, or do they feel like an ATM machine?
Hmm.
Um, what are our donor retention rates? Are they going up? Are they going down? What are we doing that works well for donor retention? Um, and how are we, what's the cadence, right? Are we asking for donations in every single communication, or are we interspersing storytelling? I'll tell you a great story about that. There's a group, Give Directly. It's phenomenal. They are providing cash assistance to the poorest people around the world. Last January, they raised millions of dollars to support people who were affected by the wildfires in LA. And they raised a lot of money on Every.org and a matching campaign to do that. So that's January. February, the normal cadence, Drew, would have been to go back out and ask those people for money again. But instead, what they did is they segmented those new donors by zip code. And they told them a story of the impact of their giving on their local community, which is really what people care deeply about, right? And they
Hmm.
said, in your zip code, in your community, your donation helped us support 35 families that had lost everything in the fires. And the response from the donors was unbelievable. They thanked them so much for the information. They were so delighted. They were so moved. And the retention rate up for that particular cohort of donors is significantly higher than their usual retention rates.
So really, you're talking about a job of a fundraiser being to educate its board in a sense. And, they could take this video and show it to their board, but I'm assuming you would think you would want fundraisers to sort of arrive at those board meetings with some different metrics, some different approaches and different strategies to show them the benefit of a more relational approach to fundraising.
That is a huge task. And yes, that is the responsibility, not just of development staff, depending on how
Hmm.
big the organization is, but of the C-suite, Drew, right?
Hmm.
Too often I see a tension in organizations between the C-suite and the development staff, right? So we need the C-suite to buy into what I call relational fundraising at scale. We're
Hmm.
going to talk about AI later on. That's
Yep.
where that
Yep.
part comes in. They have to buy into that this is not an add-on or feel good. This is an essential way of being in the world that particularly right now when automation is overtaking our world in so many ways, where AI is everywhere, we need to lean into being relational because fundraising and generosity are the elixirs to the lack of connection, the lack of meaning that so many
Hmm.
people feel right now. We have the answer. We just have to really make it the centerpiece of what we're doing in relation to donors.
Well, let's get into, we're about halfway through the conversation. Let's sort of turn to solutions and stories of what works and what doesn't. Let me just start with a basic question that you answered in the piece that you wrote for us. What can fundraisers do to earn trust? What are some basic things on the website, in the stories they tell, otherwise to help build that trust?
So number one, Drew, is I think you have to make yourself available to the public. There is a tendency of a lot of organizations to not even show their faces on their websites, right? There are some causes, very few, where we get why that would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for the most part, Drew, I want to go to a website and I want to see humans. I want to see who runs this organization. Who are you, right? That's my first question about any organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see faces. I want to be able to talk to a person, right? There has to be some avenue to do that. Even if you put up a chatbot to answer rote questions, maybe you run a community center and your staff is answering the question of when are you open like 80 times a day. I get that, right? But you still want to make sure that it's easy to be able to talk to a person if you need or want to. So that's first up. We have to be even more human in this moment, Drew, and open and available to people. I want to know there's stories from staff people. Why are you here? Why do you do this work? So that's one thing. Another thing that organizations can do, Drew, is connect donors to one another, either online or in person even. And it doesn't have to be, there doesn't even have to be an agenda. It could be, let's have, there are 10 of us in our town who support this same cause. So that is a common thread that we have. Let's go to coffee. Let's just meet one another. We have at least that in common. And an organization doesn't have to have a staff person there, but you could make it easy to introduce people by zip code and maybe offer to help them create their own giving circle as well. Now, I know a lot of organizations, Drew, get nervous about that of, ooh, what if that group decides to fund somebody else? You know what? With or without you in the room, they're going to fund whom they like, right? Most people give to multiple organizations. You being of service to donors, of leaning into generosity with them, can only serve your organization well.
How about in terms of donors contributing to your mission beyond their financial support? What other ways can they contribute to the mission?
So this is one of the issues I've been writing and speaking about for a really long time, Drew. And for some reason, it seems to be very difficult for organizations. And going back a ways, right, to an earlier understanding of organizations as top-down bureaucracies, there is a sense, if you come at this work with a command and control viewpoint, that you're supposed to have all the answers as staff, right? So you do all the work inside, you develop the strategy, and you tie it up with a ribbon, and you send it out into the world. And that is a great way of distancing people from your work, right? That tells, the signals that sends is, we don't really need your help. We need your money, but we don't need your help, right? There are all sorts of ways of being in conversation with your donors and supporters and asking for real input. Now, I've talked to people, many people over the years about that. And so many people's first reaction when I say that, Drew, is, ooh, what if we get suggestions we don't want or we can't use? And to me, that's the opening for a conversation. What you want is a conversation, right? There's nothing magical about that. So if you set out with people and say, our strategy has been to have an in-person gala every spring, but we don't know if that's really suiting people anymore, right? We could have house parties, we could do other things, right? How do people feel about this? And then you get the feedback, then you're obliged to be able to share what you learned. You're not obliged to have to take it all, right? You're obliged to consider it and to say, yes, we heard you, but here's why or why not, this works for us. That's a conversation, Drew. And organizations need to lean into being conversational instead of unidirectional in their communications if they want to genuinely connect with people. I'd say that is a huge opportunity for organizations.
Can I ask, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the small development shop, one or two person, and a lot of what you talk about sounds like a lot of work. So it's a
Work.
question of
A lot of work. Right.
a question of how do you pick your spots to do
Yeah.
this sort of work, and how do you manage it in a way, or maybe there are things you stop doing in order to be able to do this kind of work?
You know what's a lot of work, Drew? Losing 81% of your donors from year
Yeah.
1 to year 2,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really expensive and stressful way of working. If we put as much energy into retaining donors as we do into acquiring them right now, then the steam gets out of the pot and we can breathe a little bit, right? If we can get that donor retention rate up to 25%, 30%,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and if we can use AI well, and we're going to talk about that in a second,
Yep. Yep.
now we have time to be in conversation with people. But that's only if we choose to get off the hamster wheel. It's the
Yep.
hamster wheel that makes us so stressed and having no time, and it doesn't
Right.
work,
Yep.
right?
Yep. We've seen that, the 20%, 20%. So you talk to many, many groups. Do you have examples or things, small things even, that groups are doing that you think could be emulated fairly easily?
Yeah, so there's a group that uses every.org a lot called the Washington Heights Choir, and
Mm-hmm.
their board members each set up their own small matching campaign every year on every.org for their give or get. And they're raising $500 a piece, Drew. But by each putting up their campaign, they are accountable to one another. It's public. They can share it with their friends on all their social channels. And it makes their fundraising much more communal than it would be if every board member is just doing it in their own little silo.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
love the way that they've made that a community activity. And anybody can create their own matching campaign on every.org, and there are no fees for setting up any campaigns. We heard from a small organization last year, Drew, perhaps one of my favorite activities I've ever heard, and that is a very small organization. They have a monthly board meeting. Their board members come an hour early to every meeting. They hand out a list of donors from that month, and they call them and thank them all together.
Mm-hmm.
If you have board members who don't want to raise money, and that's a lot of board members, what a beautiful thing to have them do. And what a beautiful call to get as a donor. And that's it. There's no ask. It's just thank
Mm-hmm.
you for supporting us. You could ask, what does our organization mean to you? Or why did you come to us to learn more about them? And that would be wonderful too. It's just a beautiful activity, and it really ties the board more into the work of the organization as well. And then there are those local giving circles, which I think are really powerful for connecting donors to one another and keeping them engaged with the organizations.
Well, I think, I want to come full circle a little bit in that you talked about putting the human face, making organizations appear human. And, we probably all on this call have seen the data showing the decline in trust in American institutions overall,
Yeah,
including nonprofits. We're seeing nonprofits, foundations losing trust. And I think perhaps it's worth noting that what you're talking about doing are a lot of strategies and efforts to not present the organization as an institution, but as a set of human beings, and to make that
yeah,
human connection. So I think that's worth circling back to. Let me ask, now that we're talking about the humanness of things, AI. You're
yeah,
an expert on it. You're an expert on
right.
AI. you argue that it can be used to create these relational, do relational fundraising. So talk a little bit about your experience with AI and how you see it as a benefit and perhaps a disadvantage.
So I think the biggest opportunity with AI, Drew, is to use it to reduce the administrative overload on staff and on organizations. AI right now is best at doing rote tasks that none of us want to do anyway, reconciling a budget, drafting, doing the first draft of an email, helping us to find information in that shared drive that was never set up in the right way to begin with, right? All of those things
Yep.
that are taking up 20 to 30% of our time. If we can use AI carefully and responsibly just on those rote tasks, Drew, it creates what I call the dividend of time. And the dividend of time can be invested in deeply relational activities, right? We were talking just a few minutes ago of, wow, that conversation with donors feels like it takes up a lot of time. If you have this new time and you can say, as an organization, we're going to invest all of that time in building relationships with clients, with donors, with volunteers, with people, I think the ROI on that is going to be enormous. In a fundraising context, it could be, Drew, we're going to spend 5 hours a week literally picking up the phone and talking to donors. You imagine what you could learn about your organization and your donors if you just spent some time talking to them and got off that email hamster wheel, right? And again, we're back to the retention rate. That retention rate is going to go up when people feel seen and heard and know that their contributions matter. And I'm not just talking about major donors, right? You could be calling donors at every level just to find out who they are, why they're here. And get this, Drew, imagine if you could turn 10% of your current donors into ambassadors who then go out and raise money on your behalf from their friends and their networks. That's a huge benefit and free to your organization. But it does take intentional relationship building time within your organization. That's my greatest hope of where AI can provide the greatest benefit to nonprofits.
Could I ask you to be specific and perhaps a administrative task that you feel like AI is particularly good at doing now within a development office?
Well, a chatbot could answer a lot of questions that donors. Is my donation tax deductible? Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
You can have all the FAQs you want on your website. People are still going to ask that question. You all wrote a great story about a woman, Becky Straw, who runs a 2-staff person organization called the Adventure Project. And she's using ChatGPT as her marketing assistant, right? She has trained it on their brand, and she has to do first cut of communication, then tailor that communication to the different social channels. Like what you post on Facebook is different than what you post on LinkedIn. And it's doing all of that work for her that she could never afford to hire a staff person to do, and freeing up time to be able to talk to donors.
Well, speaking of time, we've sort of hit our half an hour. I want to be respectful. Thank actually everybody on this call. I know this is an incredibly busy time of year for you. So thank you for taking the time out to be with us. Thank you, Allison, for taking the time to be with us and out of your work day. Just so you all know, our next event won't be for another month. We'll be off for the holidays. We have a Commons and Conversations scheduled for January 27th at 12 p.m. It is with the novelist Colin McCann. We're very excited. He will be coming on to talk about some work he does with his organization. He founded Narrative 4, which is working with young people and the power of storytelling to connect people across differences. So we're very excited about that. We will have registration information. It was scheduled for December, postponed. We'll have registration information on our LinkedIn page in the events section. So please take a look at that when we post. And otherwise, I appreciate, again, your time. Enjoy your holidays, and we'll see you after the new year. Take care.